Chapter 28. The first school day every year. Every year, during the Christmas holidays, Argiro would buy fabric from Miller's. That store had all the different school uniform materials of the schools round about, and mothers would come in, buy a few yards of fabric, and make their sons and daughters summer and winter uniforms. Argiro used her sewing skills to make Vula's new school dresses and the boys' shorts. At the start of every year, Vula went to school in a bright new dress, and Peter and Jimmy wore their new shorts. In those days, women had to sew their own kids' clothes or ask someone else to sew them. The Mothers' Club at the school also had people who could sew uniforms for a cheap price, if any mothers couldn't sew. Yes, you could buy some uniforms from the store, as we do nowadays, but it was quite expensive, and if you wanted a good fit, you had to pay someone and get your clothes made. Argiro's sewing skills were appreciated by the Haddis family too. Every year, Mrs. Haddis bought fabric and gave it to Argiro to sew new dresses for Peggy. It was always exciting starting the new school year. The children felt excited to be in a higher class level. Before the end of the year, they had visited their new teacher in his or her classroom to become used to them. The children were always excited and eager to visit their new teacher and felt they had grown up a little bit more. When Vula started grade 5, Miss Slater handed out exercise books for the different subjects. The children carefully wrote their names on the front of each book and put them into their desks. Then they took them home for their mothers to cover them with brown paper to protect them from damage, as the exercise books had to last a whole year. 2 pupils could sit at the double desks, which had lift-up lids, so they kept all their books, rulers and writing materials in their desks. For special art and craft lessons, the teacher would sometimes give out coloured squares of paper. It smelt fresh, and the kids loved to smell the new paper. One day, Miss Slater gave out 3 pieces of fresh, coloured squares with strict instructions not to do anything with it until she told them. It was expensive and not to be wasted by mistakes. She showed them how to use their rulers and pencils to draw measured lines on 2 of the coloured squares of paper. Then she gave out scissors and showed the class how to cut along the lines to make long strips. Next, she asked the children to come to her desk, one at a time, with their 3rd coloured sheet. At her desk, she used a Stanley knife to cut rows of lines on their paper. Finally, she showed the class how to weave a pattern onto the paper she had cut by using the strips. There were many different patterns, and Miss Slater used the woven paper to teach about the art of weaving and to teach words like waft and warp. Hamilton was the wool capital of Australia, so weaving and wool spinning were interesting facts for the children to learn. Most children had their own set of coloured pencils. Argiro would shave the ends of the pencils and write her kids' names on them. Coloured sets of Faber-Castell or Derwent were the most popular. Derwents were expensive, but they had silver and gold colours, which all the kids wanted to use. When pupils were colouring in, these two pencil colours were often borrowed by classmates, but they had to promise not to use up the pencils too much. So anyone who owned Derwents was popular during colouring in and craft lessons. Wooler discovered a secret way of making her colours brighter and deeper. She used to put water on the tips of the pencils, and she kept the secret to herself. But before the end of the year, she told the other kids. Grade 5 was also the year pupils went from using an ink nib to getting a fountain pen license, but only if their teacher thought that their ink nib handwriting was up to scratch. Blotting paper and ink were needed for good nib writing, and the pupils had to take good care not to make a mess when they were writing. Normal ballpoint pens were not allowed to be used by pupils until the middle of grade 6. That's because teachers thought children's writing would go to pot if it wasn't carefully practiced with a nib and lots of concentration. Social studies in grade 5 were all about the Australian explorers like Burke and Wills. They also studied the cultures of other countries. Because Wooler was one of the few children in the class with migrant parents, Miss Slater sometimes asked her about the Greek culture. Kids at that age want to be the same as other kids, so Wooler felt embarrassed when Miss Slater asked her to tell the class what she ate for breakfast. Wooler said porridge because she thought that was what the other kids ate. Well, it was a little white lie, because Argiro usually made her kids toast and eggs with a glass of milk, never porridge. Grade 5 was an interesting year, and the pupils felt important because, for the first time, they were allowed to use compasses and stencils of Australia and Victoria to trace maps into their exercise books for geography. These were bought from newsagents. There were little holes in the stencils for the capital cities and for the borders of the states, so you could use a sharp pencil to make dots there. Another thing that they learned in grade 5 was to have turns taking weather readings. Each day, outside in the school ground, they measured the air pressure and temperature from a barometer and the rain level using a water gauge. That year, to get some money for charity, Miss Slater entered the beauty contest in the Hamilton show. She blushed when the headmaster, Mr. Harris, announced during school assembly that she was the winner. Seeing her, the kids realized that teachers might feel shy too. She quietly explained to them that she had wanted to help make some money for charity, and not that she felt herself to be beautiful. Anyhow, the class was proud of her because she was such a caring and interesting teacher. They felt that the other grade 5 teacher was not as good as their teacher.